We're in Cordoba, Spain at the Mosque-Cathedral. This is far and away the #1 attraction in Cordoba. A lot of people come here just to see the Mosque-Cathedral. It's supposed to be massive inside and incredible because you've got your mosque, your Islamic architecture, you've got your Christian architecture, and supposedly there's some Roman ruins in there as well. So this thing's been around nearly 2,000 years, at least parts of it have been. So we're going to go in, take a look around, see what it's all about, and go to the Mosque-Cathedral. So come on, let's go.
Cordoba is an easy train ride from Seville or Madrid, and lots of people come here just for a quick day trip, but I really believe if you want to experience everything Cordoba has to offer, staying overnight at least one night, maybe two, is a much better idea. The #1 attraction in Cordoba is the Mezquita, also known as the Mosque-Cathedral. It's hard to understand how massive this place actually is, but I'll tell you, there's a 250,000 square feet underneath this roof. There are hundreds of these Islamic arches, and they are absolutely stunning. They seem to disappear into infinity, and the double arches, they're especially evocative. Now, the history of the Mezquita, that's a little fuzzy. The Romans and then the Visigoths were in Cordoba, and there's some evidence that the Romans had a temple, or at least a structure of some kind here. After all, the Arabs used Roman columns as part of the construction of the Mezquita. At least that's the legend, and it holds water because there are Roman columns in here. Although they aren't original, it seems that the Arabs copied those Roman columns. So maybe there was a Roman temple here, maybe not. The building of the mosque itself started in the 9th century, about 50 years after the Moors got here, and they kept expanding the building over and over and over again until the Caliphate collapsed in Cordoba 200 years later. When the Spanish Reconquista took Cordoba, the mosque became a cathedral. But here's the interesting thing. The Christians didn't tear down the mosque. In fact, they not only kept a lot of the original Islamic design, which is still there, they used Islamic artisans to design and build Christian chapels in the newly christened cathedral. So you've got this Christian cathedral with Islamic design elements. Really, really fascinating. And you might be thinking, well, why did these Islamic artisans want to work in a Christian cathedral? Well, maybe they didn't, but as part of the law that governed Islamic artisans back in that day, the craftsmen were required a certain amount of days working for the Christians, so they put them to work in the church. The Mosque-Cathedral is a can't-miss attraction. I'd recommend getting a guide to show you around and explain the building's complex history. Otherwise, you're just wandering around going, wow, that looks cool, without understanding any of the context. Just outside the Mosque-Cathedral is Bar Santos, a little cafe famous for their egg omelet, or tortilla in Spanish. During the day, the place gets jammed with tourists who take their tortilla outside and eat it while sitting on the wall. But we went at night after the day trippers had all left and enjoyed our tortilla inside the bar, pretty much with just us and some locals. Just behind the Mosque-Cathedral is the Roman Bridge of Cordoba. This original bridge was built by the Romans, although there was probably a wooden bridge that was there before the Romans put their stone bridge up. The Muslims built their bridge on the ruins of the Roman one several hundred years later, and it's been restored and renovated several times since then. So even though it's called a Roman bridge, it's not originally Roman, and even the Muslim part of that bridge, most of it is not intact anyway. But the reason why it's interesting to come here is because it's become kind of a gathering place in Cordoba, especially when the weather's nice. And you're in Andalusia, so the weather's almost always nice. People come here to walk the dog or just hang out, meet friends. It's a great place to people watch. There's also the ruins of a Roman temple in Cordoba. It's crazy to think that this wasn't discovered until the 1950s when the adjacent city hall was undergoing an expansion. I mean, think about it. They're like getting ready to renovate the city hall, and they're like, there's a Roman temple here. We'll have to put these plans on hold. We were walking around the neighborhood, enjoying the Roman temple and just enjoying Cordoba, when a group of singers stopped on the corner and started performing. There's also a great little cafe in this neighborhood called Vecca, just around the corner from the temple. Here you get the famous local pastry, Pastel de Cordobas. Next up, the tiny Cordoba Synagogue in the Jewish quarter. There was a thriving Jewish community in Cordoba when the Muslims were here. They tolerated the Jews, but that changed after the Reconquest when the Christians took over, when persecution of the Jews increased and increased until they converted or fled. Others were tortured and killed in monstrous ways during the Spanish Inquisition. Cordoba was even a center of the Inquisition. This is where many Jews were tortured and killed for hundreds of years. The synagogue itself is one of the oldest in Spain, dating to the early 14th century. It's really small, and because of its small stature, a lot of people think that it might have been just a little house of worship for a single family, but no one knows for sure. There's Hebrew writing on the wall, but the design elements, again, are Islamic, showing that Mudajir artisans who stayed behind after the Reconquest likely did a lot of the work here, just like they did at the Mosque-Cathedral. After the synagogue, stop by Bodega Guzman. It's just a 1-minute walk, and you'll enjoy one of the most characteristic bars in the Jewish Quarter for a fino sherry. The Calleja de las Flores, or Flower Alley, is a very popular attraction in Cordoba. The street is lined with flower pots full of blooms. The blue flower pots against the walls provide a striking contrast to the colorful flowers. Unfortunately, we're here in winter, so there weren't as many blooms, but still, there were flowers blooming, and it's definitely worth a visit. But expect it to be crowded, especially with the rise of social media and Instagram. Lots of people come here and will elbow you out of the way to get that perfect shot for Instagram. And if you're really into gardens, the place to go is the Alcázar de los Reyes Cristianos, or Palace of the Christian Royals. You remember Ferdinand and Isabella from high school history, the king and queen of Spain during Columbus's time? Well, this is one of their residences. Walking to the palace, you might from the outside think it doesn't look like much, but you need to go inside if just to see the Hall of Mosaics. These gorgeous mosaics date to the Roman period of the 2nd and 3rd century. Now, they weren't in this hall where they are displayed now. The Alcázar was built much, much later, but they were found nearby in Cordoba and moved here for display in the Alcázar. Outside is the real attraction, though. You can see the Muslim influence on the massive gardens. In fact, the Muslims built the original gardens and the water features, but they had fallen into decline and had been renovated many, many times over the centuries. But at over 10 acres, you can spend quite a lot of time here and try and get away from some of the crowds. It's really very enjoyable and very beautiful. Okay, there you go. The best things to do in Cordoba, Spain. And remember, mix up your sightseeing with some tasty food in Cordoba. I just scratched the surface of the places to eat here. Check out my video about all my favorite spots to eat and drink in Cordoba. I've got a link to that video in the description below. And don't forget to like and subscribe to Destination Eat Drink so you can get all our new foodie videos. You can also get foodie travel guides and my foodie blog at my website, destinationeatdrink.com, and listen to the podcast too at destinationeatdrink.com/pod. Until next time, I'm Brent Peterson. I'll see you down the road.